The white media's unrelenting negative depiction of black people that amplifies the negative to the point that it distorts our reality is much more than just biased media reporting. It's actually a covert, insidious, black racially demoralizing, divide and conquer psychological warfare tactic, also known as divide and rule. Demoralizing, divide and conquer is a method of maintaining control over a targeted population through constant and unrelenting demoralization in order to create self-hatred and division between them. This system is deployed like a massive media marketing campaign that constantly subjects black people to receiving only the fraudulent and worst narratives about ourselves. Within this system, fraudulent, black, racially demoralizing and devaluing propaganda is being pumped unrelentingly into the unsuspecting minds of the black population without being challenged or counterbalanced by an equal amount of positive, black, racially affirming information. It conveys the subliminal message that black people are now our own worst enemies and that we therefore need whites to govern over our lives. Moreover, that black people should admire, respect, and trust only whites. This system is extremely effective because when black people are repetitively presented these noted narratives from trusted white media sources, it can be very difficult to resist its implied programming, especially when the propaganda is being told daily and so unrelentingly. Its weapon is the demoralizing message that it carries and the way that it adversely affects the black population in terms of our behaviors. It is a process with the objective to erode the morale of a targeted population through continuous demoralization. By destroying a group's morale, it can even prevent a group from fighting. It's very effective. No group can be constantly inundated with negative, demoralizing disinformation about themselves and not suffer some adverse effect. With time being unable to refute the constant negative disinformation about themselves, many black people eventually comes to accept those narratives. Many black people then experience profound feelings of humiliation and ask ourselves, damn, why we can't get our shit together? Why we can't get our shit together? This unrelenting humiliation then causes many black people to become demoralized, divided, self-loathing, and resentful towards their own racial group. In the most extreme cases, many will even attempt to disassociate themselves from the other black people. Psychologists call this disassociation. It's a defense mechanism that evolves to put a distance between themselves and from the pain of being humiliated. These are those black people that have been brainwashed to go out of their way to try to show white people that we're not all bad and to seek white validation and white approval. Because they've been manipulated to perceive our own people as being the bad people and to perceive white people as being the good ones, in spite of a brutal history to the contrary. These are the group that are known as the black people are known as the buffer zone. They act as the buffer between the white society and the black population in defense of the white society. This buffer class is comprised of a segment of the black population that has become so demoralized by the white society's negative depiction of our racial group that they become self-loathing and they literally fight against black people in defense of the white society. This is why nowadays, before black people can even confront the system of white supremacy, we're often forced to first fight against those buffer zone black people that are brainwashed to defend it. It's their role to do so. They are used to discredit our merit. When we say something's wrong in America, racism, they put a black head there. No, it's not having a black person say it. It devalues our credibility that there's a problem with racism. However, these buffer zone black people don't know they've been brainwashed. They think it's of their own free will, but it is not. Here's a basic example of how these buffer zone black people are created, okay? Imagine that a crew of people were out at sea aboard their very own well-functioning ship, and that it was being followed by another ship, a second ship that was following and constantly broadcasting derogatory messages to the first ship, transmitting messages claiming that the first ship's crew was not seaworthy and therefore was slowly sinking, that there was a mutiny being planned, that the crew in the first ship was incompetent. With time, the crew constantly receiving all those negative, derogatory messages and deficiencies about themselves, being unable to refute or confirm them, will grow weary, paranoid, and will eventually come to accept the negative assessment about themselves. The taunted crew will begin to internalize those negative things that's being said about themselves. This will subconsciously influence how they react with each other, how they perceive with each other. It will cause them to become resentful towards each other, distrustful against each other. And once they've been demoralized, they start demoralizing each other. They'll even start fighting among each other. The taunted crew may even become so besieged by deep feelings of self-hatred that many may jump into the sea and attempt to swim toward the taunting ship, believing that the taunting ship is superior, even if their ship was in fact the superior ship. Some of these swimmers will even try to disassociate themselves from their fellow members on the ship. Oh, I'm not one of them. I'm not one of them. Those crew members swimming toward the taunting ship will be perceived as traitors and coons and sellouts by the members of us who stay on the ship watching them swim away. But these swimmers are actually the weaker-minded victims of the immense humiliation and demoralization. That their minds collapse. They have weaker minds and their minds collapse under the constant demoralization. Now, this was achieved by merely inundating a targeted crew with negative information about themselves. The stronger mind stayed on the ship. The weaker one jumps off. No group can be constantly subjected to receiving only the fraudulent worst about themselves and not suffer some adverse effect. This well-proven warfare tactic is precisely what white oppressive forces now deploys against Black people. This entire process was achieved by constantly inundating the crew with negative information about themselves. It convinced them to believe that there's something wrong with them, that the core power is internalized. When you believe that your core power is an internalized one, this shifts your collective from your enemy and shifts it towards your own people. The process with the objective is to erode the morale of a targeted population through continuous demoralization. By destroying the morale, it can even prevent their will to fight against their enemies, and it's very effective. As I said before, no group can be constantly inundated with negative, demoralizing information about their group and not suffer some adverse effect. Within a real-world setting, this demoralizing, divide and rule psychological warfare tactic is what white society deploys against Black people unrelentingly through the media. This is all possible because people are like computers. All you have to do is keep giving them certain information every so often, and you can persuade an entire generation towards an applied objective. It doesn't matter if the information presented is untrue. Most Black people will act accordingly to the information because they've all received the same disinformation about themselves. This psychological warfare system provides the white society with a more proficient method for subjugating Black people. For unlike the past blatant Jim Crow and apartheid white racist subjugation tactics that Black people could easily identify and therefore unify ourselves against and develop counter strategies against, this current psychological warfare system is not easily recognized, nor was it easily comprehended by most of its Black victims. It works by affecting the subconscious minds of Black people through unrelenting demoralization. It taps into the immense power that shame has upon the human mind to mentally enslave millions of Black people. Those Black people who do not critically think never notices their mental change.